Turning now to the deadly E. coli outbreak connected to onions at McDonald's. Dozens of people got sick. Several had to be hospitalized before the connection was made to the apparently contaminated produce. But many people didn't start feeling symptoms until a few days after consumption. Joining us live to answer your questions about an E. coli infection is infectious disease specialist Dr. Suman Radhakrishna. Dr. Radhakrishna, thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with this. What is the process of food becoming contaminated with E. coli and then someone contracting an illness?
First of all, thank you for having me. That is an important question because we're going into the holidays where we're going to be cooking, so it's important to know how they get contaminated. It's usually sewage contamination, either animal or human, and it is transmitted through contaminated food, and it can be meats that are undercooked. It can be fruits and vegetables that are not adequately washed and cleaned, and especially when people eat them raw, like what happened this time with the slivered onions. The other thing is water supply. When it rains a lot, remember we tell people don't go swimming in the ocean because there is E. coli contamination. That's exactly why we tell people not to do that. Then the third reason is when someone is having a diarrheal illness from E. coli, they touch surfaces and we go touch the same surfaces. And if we don't practice proper hand hygiene, then it's a problem and we can get infected. Last and most important is when you're cutting stuff and cooking in the kitchen, make sure you have separate cutting boards or wash them in between your meats, between your different veggies and your fruits.
Oh, that's good to know. It makes me want to wash my hands right now. Well, doctor, why does it always seem just, to me that onions are a common culprit? They go bad so quickly.
Remember, they're under the ground. You put manure. What does manure have? It does have sometimes, waste, either animal or human waste, and you have E. coli in there. So that's one problem. And the other problem is onions are for most part eaten raw. So if you are not careful in making sure the peel is taken off and the outside is clean before you start cutting, it's a problem. Now you've cut your onions and you're making, let's say, salsa, and you're going to be mixing the tomatoes in, and you add the tomatoes on the same cutting board and you cut with the same knife, then the contaminated onions will contaminate the tomatoes and so on and so forth. So that's what we have to be careful about.
Interesting. How long does it take from eating a contaminated food to when you start feeling those symptoms?
The literature says up to 7 days, but for most people, they start having symptoms by the third day. The symptoms can be variable. For some people, it's just, I had an unusual bowel movement. And some people, it can be cramps, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. And some people can be so deathly sick that they stop making urine because they're so dehydrated.
Oh, how do scientists figure out exactly what caused the infection?
We can do stool sample studies to see if there is this type of E. coli. Remember, we all have E. coli. So just the presence of E. coli doesn't mean that we have an infection because it's normally in our colon. But this particular type, the O15787, can be tested through PCR techniques in the stool. Once again, you have to test it early on in the infection because over time our gut will clear it, and so you may not find it after like a week in the stool. So there is that issue as well.
How can an E. coli infection lead to serious complications? You mentioned some of them, but for example, kidney failure.
The kidney failure is happening because they are so dehydrated. There's just so much nausea and vomiting. There's just so much diarrhea that you're not able to keep up the losses. Now, somebody who's frail and elderly, somebody who's a little baby who has trouble hydrating, and someone who has a problem with their immune system, either because of poorly controlled, it could be even diabetes that is not well controlled. It could be cancer chemotherapy, transplants, these are all individuals who can get it. Another group of people who are immunocompromised that we forget about are the patients with arthritis, the rheumatoid arthritis, who are on all these medications like Humira, or Tesla, and all of those. So they are also immune suppressing, and they have to be careful about food hygiene. Now, there's another group of people who are very healthy, but they have never been exposed to these kinds of bacteria. They travel to some place where there is sewage contamination, or they're drinking off of water from a lake or a stream. Then they can also feel deathly ill because they are having trouble keeping up with the hydration.
A lot of good information there. Dr. Suman Radhakrishna, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a good day.